Beneath Australia's sun-bleached landscapes lies a quieter, slow emotional current that most tourists never sense. It appears only when the novelty settles and the rhythms of daily life reveal themselves. The contrast can feel startling, especially to Americans and Canadians accustomed to sharper edges of urgency. What seems at first like a relaxed paradise begins to show a different kind of intensity, one formed not by speed, but by spaciousness, distance, and an unusual relationship to silence. The first impressions usually revolve around the physical environment. The air feels larger, as if it carries a wider horizon. Streets in many towns stretch with deliberate emptiness, edged by eucalyptus that whisper more than they speak. Even in cities, the atmosphere holds a certain looseness, as though everything exists with an extra inch of breathing room. For newcomers from North America, this spatial generosity often generates both curiosity and unease. The environment appears open, yet the social cues inside it operate with a subtlety that isn't immediately visible. What stands out most is the absence of friction. Time moves with a gentle elasticity that Americans and Canadians rarely encounter at home. The pace is measured, conversations settle into slower crescents, and daily interactions seem to carry an unspoken rule. Intensity stays beneath the surface. This creates a surprising emotional climate. Many visitors expect constant friendliness, bright, welcoming warmth, but instead encounter something quieter, more reserved, and distinctly understated. It is not distance, but a form of grounded calm that shapes how people connect. The deeper cultural differences reveal themselves in small behavioral patterns. Australians value a kind of egalitarian informality that resists spectacle. Status signals hold little influence. Self-importance is met with soft disapproval. Jokes emerge dry and unhurried, often delivered without shifting tone, as if humour lives in the space between words rather than in the punchline. Compliments come sparsely. Emotional expression remains controlled. Even enthusiasm, when it appears, feels modest and folded into everyday interactions rather than presented openly. For Americans in particular, this creates a striking contrast. At home, openness, high energy, and verbal affirmation form the backbone of social interaction. In Australia, restraint carries its own cultural weight. A calm exterior is seen as a sign of competence. A lack of urgency signals confidence rather than indifference. Everyday life seems infused with a philosophy that insists on balance above ambition, steadiness above display, collective ease above individual intensity. It can feel refreshing or disorienting, depending on what one expects from a social environment. The most telling scenes appear in mundane situations. A cafe queue that moves slowly but without complaint. A workplace that pauses for conversation yet maintains an unspoken boundary around personal stories. A neighborhood gathering where the atmosphere stays light, casual, and quietly humorous. These interactions form a mosaic of cultural tendencies, simplicity, modesty, and a refusal to dramatize. For North Americans used to emotional immediacy, these moments reveal the hidden reality. Tourists rarely recognize the subtle choreography of Australian social life, where meaning is found not in what is said, but in the ease with which things are left unsaid. This understated rhythm shapes daily life in ways North Americans often overlook. In many communities, social distance isn't emotional detachment, it is a form of respect, an acknowledgement that individuality should be given room rather than crowded with questions or assumptions. This creates a social landscape where people interact gently, almost indirectly. Conversations flow without pressure, favors are offered without ceremony, and personal space is guarded not defensively but instinctively. Americans and Canadians sometimes interpret this as aloofness, yet it reflects a cultural instinct toward balance and quiet coexistence. Over time, the psychological contrast becomes more pronounced. Australians often place a high value on decompressing, stepping back, and maintaining a stable emotional temperature. Stress is acknowledged but rarely dramatized. The preferred response to difficulty is understatement, a calm nod, a small shrug, a simple acknowledgement that things will sort themselves out. This behavior can feel deceptively minimal for newcomers from cultures where emotional clarity is often conveyed through intensity. In Australia, depth hides in moderation, and resilience appears as a refusal to let life's turbulence disturb the surface too much. Typical interactions reveal this pattern again and again. A worker finishing a long shift might sit quietly with colleagues, letting the silence carry as much meaning as the conversation. A sports club gathering may contain laughter, but it comes in soft waves rather than loud crescendos. Even celebrations feel grounded. Joy appears real but never inflated. These subtle expressions create a sense of collective composure. Everyday life becomes a network of calm gestures, small acts of steadiness that signal belonging without demanding attention for many Americans and Canadians. This environmental and emotional quietness initiates an internal shift. The absence of constant stimulation encourages a slower awareness. Decisions feel less rushed. Social obligations loosen. There is space to recalibrate expectations and reconsider what intensity should look like. The cultural atmosphere gradually teaches a new form of comfort, one not built on affirmation or overt enthusiasm, but on the assurance that life doesn't need to be pushed to be meaningful. Yet this discovery rarely happens during a short visit. Tourists encounter the beaches, the wildlife, the relaxed imagery, but not the underlying stillness that shapes Australian life. That stillness reveals itself only with time, in the in-between moments, in the quiet acceptance woven through ordinary interactions. It is this hidden reality that often transforms outsiders the most, a cultural rhythm that values steadiness over spectacle, grounding over noise, presence over presentation. It becomes clear that Australia's calm exterior isn't emptiness, it is a cultural architecture designed to preserve emotional space in a vast, ever-open land. As this cultural architecture becomes more familiar, many Americans and Canadians notice a gradual change in their own internal landscape. The constant push for productivity begins to loosen its grip. The need to narrate emotions gives way to a quieter form of clarity. Days unfold with a softer cadence, shaped by the unspoken belief that stability is more valuable than speed. This shift does not erase one's original habits, but it tempers them, creating an unexpected middle ground where ambition coexists with calm. The influence of Australia's social climate becomes especially apparent in relationships and community life. Friendships develop slowly, often through shared routines rather than intense emotional exchanges. Acceptance flows horizontally rather than vertically. People earn trust by showing consistency over time, not by revealing vulnerability in a single conversation. Many North Americans find that this long arc of connection leads to a different kind of closeness, one built on reliability rather than verbal openness. Bonds become anchored not in dramatic moments, but in the quiet repetition of everyday gestures that signal solidarity. Even conflict operates within this restrained framework. Disagreements tend to be approached with a deliberate lack of escalation. Voices remain even. Criticism softens into suggestion, and frustration is often diffused by humor so subtle it can be missed entirely. For those accustomed to more direct or emotionally charged styles of communication, this can feel both soothing and perplexing. Yet this approach reflects a cultural instinct to preserve harmony without denying difference. It shows how deeply Australians value equilibrium, shaping interactions in ways visitors rarely grasp during brief stays. The hidden reality of this cultural environment also affects how people perceive the landscape itself. Wide horizons, open skies, and long distances reinforce an internal spaciousness. The physical world mirrors the emotional one, expansive, quiet, understated. Many Americans and Canadians describe a growing awareness of this alignment, sensing that the environment encourages patience and a recalibration of pace. Over time, the contrast between initial expectations and lived experience becomes striking. What once seemed relaxed now appears intricately balanced. What once felt simple reveals layers of subtle social intelligence. In the end, this invisible cultural current leaves a distinct imprint. It demonstrates that a society can be open without being expressive, friendly without being effusive, and communal without being intrusive. It offers a reminder that calmness is not the absence of depth, but a different way of carrying it. Many North Americans come to see Australia not simply as a land of beaches and sunlight, but as a place where emotional restraint forms its own quiet sophistication. And in recognizing this, they often gain a broader understanding of how culture shapes the unseen textures of daily life. Make sure you've dropped a like and hit that subscribe button. That way the next video will be out as quick as possible.